But yeah, as Mish gave the introduction, thank you very much. I'm Frenchie. I'm known as Sam Stewart when I'm in trouble. It's my absolute pleasure to be here with you all today, obviously for a fascinating session with Branden Spikes of Cyberinc, SpaceX, and PayPal fame, amongst others as well. So while I'm not goofing around on stage, I'm the head of technology over at CultureAmp, so thanks Dr. Cornick for the shout out in your top 3. More relevant to this conversation, however, is as a kid I grew up breaking computers, sometimes even my own. While founding my own startups, I paid the bills as a professional penetration tester and security consultant, so a bit of a background in security myself. For first timers at Pause, one of the core pillars here is content you can't Google. So for the next half hour, given the security theme, we'll be tweeting out Brandon's passwords one by one, Sean Spicer style. In addition to the core pillar of content that you can't Google, the specific theme for this year's Pause is, as Mish mentioned, a different perspective. So we're looking on picking Brandon's brain on a different perspective on 2 main topics: how to get a different perspective on security for the audience, but also the perspective that you gained by working closely with Elon Musk. But before we dive into that, I'd like to know a little bit about the audience. Who here works in security? A couple of friendly faces there. Who here works in technology? Okay, cool, that's about 60%. Who here is just generally interested in technology? Cool, that's about the other 39%. And who here has never touched a computer? 1 person. 2, Mish. Yep, excellent. Okay, cool. So that's probably where the audience is at. Great. So your biography, Mish did a great job, but obviously you're a technology expert. You founded Spike Security in 2012, now merged with Orion Pro's division to form Cyberinc. Their mission, which I love, is to stop rampant cybercrime. I've got a bit of a blurb here, but you can probably do it more justice. Could you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to found Spike Security?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm a geek, really deep down. I've always loved computers, and more specifically, I love seeing them get connected. I was fortunate to grow up in the Silicon Valley when the web was born. So I got to see sort of the amazing potential of the web when I was quite young. In fact, the first job I got was developing websites, and I was 18 years old. And about a year later, I met Elon Musk and helped him develop his first company at the age of 19, and was just surrounded by this amazing experience of being in the Silicon Valley at that time and that place. So, count myself very fortunate.
Yeah, right. That's pretty interesting. There's some interesting points that we'll definitely delve into later around working with Ilan, which would be great to hear about. But first, let's dive into security. So, putting myself in the audience's shoes, I'm probably thinking, I'm not a billionaire, I'm not a criminal either. My password has, uppercase letters, numbers, and it has special characters. Why should I care about security? I'm pretty good.
Yeah, it's easy to feel complacent because, I think that for the individual, this is a little tougher question to answer. For the enterprise, it's obvious, right? They have lots of money or intellectual property. They should certainly care to protect that. But for the individual, I have a sense that everyone's information is already out there. Like, what are you protecting? It's already out there. All the big leaks that have happened with LinkedIn, for example, or with the Office of Personnel Management in the US. I mean, there's massive troves of personal information that is already out there. So what's left, right, for the consumer to protect if all of their sort of private information is out there? Well, I mean, your bank account. It'd be nice to make sure your money stays in the bank. Maybe your identity, for whatever's not already out there, I guess. So, for the consumer, it's not quite as clear, and that's why, I've made a mission out of helping to try to protect the companies that are employing the consumers. So by doing that, I hope that helps. But yeah, for the individual, it's a muddy answer for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Who here was familiar with big breaches like the LinkedIn one, Yahoo breach, OPM? Probably about 70–80%. So yeah, I think it's quite surprising for a lot of people to realize, your email address and password might already be out there. If you use the same password everywhere, that means that maybe your bank account's at risk.
If you're doing that, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite scary. So broadly, I mean, you said that you're working with companies generally. What's the state of the industry look like at the moment? Like, is it, defenders are cruising around, we've convinced that we've got a really easy job and we're just sitting back and relaxing, or the cybercrime and stuff, are attackers just going rampant? Is everything on fire? Breaches happening left, right, and center? Where, between those two extremes, where do you see the current state of security sitting?
Well, I don't think breaches are necessarily rampant, but attempts are rampant. I mean, the amount of traffic on the internet that is devoted to attempting to break into stuff or steal stuff is just, it may actually be more than the legitimate traffic. It's immense how much activity there is. I visit a lot of companies and talk to their cybersecurity people, and frequently it's all they do all day long is try to address and respond. And there's definitely, I think, the amount of damage and trouble that one person can make is probably a 10-to-1 ratio to how many white hat security professionals it takes to fix, repair, or defend against it.
Right. Like the Mr. Robot, the one guy with a funny mask who is able to cripple the entire financial system. Is that realistic?
Oh, the ability to cripple the whole financial system? Maybe for a moment. Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine there's tremendously smart and capable people defending to make sure that doesn't happen. But if it did, which is probably possible, it would only be for a moment. I think it has happened for a moment.
Sure. I think there was a great tweet a while back, which was the biggest challenge in security these days is we can't tell the difference between a nation-state attacker and a 12-year-old in a basement.
Yeah, I agree.
Excellent. So drilling into a couple of more specific quotes on your product, in doing my research, I came across some great quotes, which are, browsers cannot be secured fundamentally, and to run a browser is to run malware. For the sake of our audience, could you elaborate on what those mean?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it has to do with, first, that once an organization has done all of the sort of responsible things to secure themselves, which maybe a 10-employee company may not qualify for that unless they're pretty darn savvy, but like most big companies have layered defenses and done a good job of defending themselves. What is the thing that keeps getting in? And it's the browser.
Right.
And so that was the perspective that I gained. And I found that if you could solve that problem, you could literally put an end to essentially the 90% or greater of all attacks that are getting in.
Right. So how did you go about doing that?
Well, the technology that we developed, I actually kind of came up with the idea at SpaceX where the problem was its worst possible scenario, because unlike working at a bank or at most companies where the stuff you're protecting can be locked behind some vault, at SpaceX you've got it on the laptops. The individual employees have it right there on their computers. They're inventing it right there on the very laptops that are running browsers and that are exposed to malware all the time. So I'm like, geez, how do I keep the browsers from stealing the IP that's right there on the same computer? So that was sort of the genesis of the idea. And what I decided was the only way you could do it was if the browser wasn't on the laptops. So the technology that we've made allows the browser to run elsewhere. And to the end user, though, you don't know. You can't tell it's not running on your computer. The connection to it over the network is so fast, in some cases faster than the actual code protocols that normally do it, that the end user experience being unchanged just gives someone complete freedom. So in the cases where we've had success, we've enabled organizations to stop saying no so much, let employees go anywhere they want. And that was the culture at SpaceX. These guys had to be able to go anywhere they wanted. Instant gratification is sort of the culture in LA. I don't know if it's like that in Melbourne, but get out of my way, I got a job to do was sort of everyone's attitude.
Yeah.
And so out of that culture came our technology, which is designed to sort of work in that scenario, and it does a great job.
Yeah, the cultural aspect's an interesting one. Obviously, I'm quite biased being at Culture Amp. We're going through the process of how do you do culture-first security at the moment. But I imagine at SpaceX it would have been quite challenging with a bunch of rocket scientists who people probably don't take too kindly to being told, oh no, here's a foolish approach to stuff, here's how you need to do that. They probably don't want security to get in the way of their stuff. Yeah,
it's the worst case scenario. I mean, they're up against schedules that are so intense, anything that slows them down is not tolerable.
Yeah, right, interesting. So that kind of highlights a different point, where commonly the trope around security is, it's a guy in a hoodie with a black background, green text matrix style flag, and it looks like it's quite hard to use and it's quite foreign as an attacker, therefore defending must be hard as well. How does usability fit into that? And as you said, people wanting to use the browser without getting slowed down. Is it security versus usability where it's a trade-off, or do they work together?
Yeah, very, very much so. In fact, maybe that's another 10-to-1 ratio. The amount of effort that a security professional should be putting into usability far outweighs the effort they should be putting into the technology.
Yeah.
Because without usability, you don't have adoption. And without adoption, you have people circumventing your measures, which can actually be worse. So, yeah, in the case like in our technology, it's very easy to explain. Fortunately, I did it in 1 minute a second ago. But what's going on behind the scenes to make it easy to use is it took us years to create. We've spent far more energy on making it load instantly, be invisible, be transparent, be obvious, be intuitive. You could easily cobble together the off-the-shelf components these days to kind of do what we're doing technologically, but it would be completely unusable.
Right.
And so that's really what separates, the really powerful solutions from those that never go anywhere is usability. Interesting.
Let's move forward into your experience on the entrepreneurial journey and also working with Elon. So before branching out on your own, you worked with him, a relatively unknown individual, not very popular at all, Elon Musk.
Yeah, right.
Ian, that guy? Yeah.
Well, when I met him, nobody had heard of him.
But yeah, what was it like working with him, and what broad perspectives did you gain by being mentored by him?
Cool. Well, he's kind of an average dude. I loved working with him. He's very down to earth. In the early days, in fact, he's always solicited negative feedback and always been very open to criticism and very approachable. Always had like an open door policy. Anybody in the company can go talk to him about anything. And so great guy to get to know. And it was a very interesting experience to see someone go from a very humble and sort of, humble beginnings and a humble personality become an A-lister in the course of, I don't know, maybe it took him 11, 12 years to do this.
Yeah.
And I was there for it. I got to see it occur. And to happen to such a great guy was a pleasure. It's been an incredible experience.
So for the brief LinkedIn overview, you started working with him at Zip2 and then moved on from there with each of his companies as they went through?
Yeah, that's right. Zip2's goal was to bring sort of legacy websites online, or legacy companies onto the web, I should say, such as the New York Times. Good example. They ran the New York Times website for many years. And he was doing that at a time when that was my goal in life. I wanted to bring as many companies on the web as possible. So when I discovered Elon's company, he was tasked with this, or sort of faced with the challenge of how do I handle so much traffic? The New York Times has a lot of users, a lot of readers. And so their website servers were crashing under load, under that much traffic. And back then, man, the ability to balance load across servers was brand new. Like there was really no technology that did it well or that had been around a long time. So this is bleeding edge stuff. And I was able to go in there and help him with that and became his sort of IT go-to guy and right-hand man pretty quickly. So that was his first company. And from there, kept working with him at all of the other, all of his other startups.
So PayPal, SpaceX as well.
Yep. Yeah. I can continue. Would you like the story for how I got to SpaceX? I think I'm the only one that went to PayPal from Zip2. When he started PayPal, it was a whole new set of employees, and potentially because it was a different industry. But I called him up. I just believed in him. I could see that he was a great visionary. And despite I knew nothing about the finance industry at the time, I was excited for the challenge. And I joined him. I think I was like the 12th employee or 15th or something by the time I went over there. But got to create an awesome network, an awesome IT environment and system that would run and scale and keep PayPal secure for maybe 3 or 4 years. Very tough, bitter battle with some stiff competition from eBay, but PayPal came out on top and he sold the company to eBay and started SpaceX. And kind of, as you may know, a lot of entrepreneurs came out of PayPal. These guys were in an environment there where they were forced to grow rapidly, create awesome solutions to pretty big problems on very small budgets. Well, guess what? That's the recipe for an entrepreneur. So these guys learned those skills there, and many of them went off to create awesome companies. So rather than start a company, I was really excited by the prospect of launching rockets with Elon. So I went down to LA for 10 years and worked at SpaceX, helped them do that. Meanwhile, a lot of my colleagues and friends from PayPal were doing pretty amazing things as well. And it wasn't until the 10-year reunion in San Francisco at a party where I met them all again, and I was like, oh man, this looks like a lot of fun. So this is kind of where I got the inspiration to start mine.
Awesome. What's the craziest story that we can't Google from that time?
I had thought about that actually, in the keeping with your theme here, things you can't Google. I have to be careful with that one, but there is one that I thought of. I love this story because it was very good for me to experience this. But as an IT guy going into aerospace industry, I was up against a lot of traditional ways that aerospace does things, and these are not kind of in keeping with my way of doing things the modern way. Aerospace, in that old sort of way of doing things, you didn't really have an IT guy running the rocket. Like the rockets in the old days didn't run on networks. They ran on other things. So I kind of pushed hard for the initial early designers at SpaceX to consider allowing me to influence the design of the whole system to run on sort of modern technologies, self-healing networks and IP protocol and sort of modern stuff. And they agreed, and it was kind of a big risk. So we kind of reimagined how rockets should be built, from the software side all the way to the valves and how you control everything. And it ended up all running on IT technology. And so for the first time, I don't think this has ever happened before, but for the first time there was a role in mission control for IT. So imagine Houston, right, with the space shuttle, and one of those consoles was me sitting at a computer running IT for the launch. And
so you were one of the people who, in the countdown, you're like, IT,
right,
ready to go.
Yeah, for the first flights,
Awesome.
I was in the mission control, and I think there's still an IT position there for whoever's there today. I'm pretty certain. So, but the first time this happened, there was this idea. Another way of SpaceX pushing the boundaries was they didn't make a traditional mission control. It wasn't like a big building. They made a mobile van. They called it the command van. And the idea was you could drive it to the pad, be near the rocket, and then when it's ready to take off, you could drive it away so you're safe from whatever might happen and still control it. That didn't quite work out, but we still did some launches from the command van. And there was only enough room in there for like 12 people. So you had, launch director, mission director, safety guy, guidance guy, avionics guy, and down at the end was Branden, the IT guy, right? And so that flight was successful, and I just remember I couldn't have anticipated the electric feeling of these 12 guys shooting their fists in the air with such excitement and crying and hugging each other,
Yeah.
And I could never have anticipated that when I went to do this with Elon that I would have ever experienced that.
Absolutely. So that's a really nice segue into the next question, which is obviously Elon is known for his moonshots or his Mars shots. Branching out and doing your own startup is a bit of a moonshot as well. Specifically in a risk-averse field such as security, new things are often viewed with skepticism. How did you find that balance of security innovation in a particularly risk-averse field? How did you go about the process of research and development? You mentioned, but product market fit and so on. How did you go about that?
Well, so I've been lucky in that regard. I've always worked with people who get security, and I've met lots of entrepreneurs who don't, right? So they'll start a business and forget about security for quite a while. But when we were doing these startups, security was always talked about from the very beginning. Day one working at SpaceX, Elon stared me in the face and said, "Don't let him hack us." He gets that, right? But not all entrepreneurs get it. And so, I had maybe a different perspective or different set of experiences. So for me, I think it was pretty easy because, every company I can think of, I've always had sort of executive level or board level backing for security. And that comes, or I should say that includes the investment being made in it. So if I wanted to spend some dollars, I'd say the one topic in all of the world of IT, all the things you can spend money on, storage, networks, You know, security got the most attention. If I said this needed to be bought and it was a $100,000 thing, but it was for security, Elon would usually say, "Yep, go for it."
Excellent.
Within
So
reason.
there's good advice for anyone who wants to get their purchase order approved. Just put security label on it.
This
Done.
is for
Right
security.
there. Cool. Excellent. So a couple of more broad questions, and then I'll throw it out to the audience for some Q&A. What were the ways that working with Elon gave you a perspective that gave you an advantage, and what were the ways that you had to figure it out for yourself on your own journey?
All right. Well, let's see. I guess the advantage, probably the biggest advantage that I've gained from working with Elon would be the example, right? And I've also often had people think of him as a mentor, and I have to correct them. He's not really. He's not the guy that sits down and goes, "Hey, this is really how you should be doing this." He's the guy that says, "Hey, why is this not working correctly?" Right? Like, make it work, you know? And so that sort of, there's this example and expectation of excellence that forces you to think on your own 2 feet rather than be led, right? And I think that was an incredibly valuable lesson. So when I've started my business, and I've been thinking about that from a hiring culture too. When I'm hiring people, I'm thinking about who are the ones that could be self-starters, that can make their own initiatives and make it happen on their own without having to be, you know, led.
Interesting. So what aspects of that did you have to figure out yourself? Because that sounded like some of the things that he was able to guide you on.
Right, forgot the second part of that question. All right, geez. So I think as an entrepreneur, you're forced to kind of learn a lot of aspects of a business. And my whole career has been about IT and creating systems and solving solutions with technology, but I knew nothing about business. I knew nothing about finance, knew nothing about legal, knew nothing about benefits or HR. So I had to figure out all of those for myself, and not without making mistakes along the way.
Of course. One last question, then we'll throw it over to Slido. So what's the one lesson that can't be found on Google that you can share with us today where we can all benefit from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think this talks to kind of why I'm here. I'm a proponent of the web and of technology and its advancement. And when I see the root cause of things not going well, from cybersecurity to startups failing, and there's some relations there, I see it coming from the fact that maybe not everybody benefited from having security be important from the beginning. So make security important from the beginning. And I don't mean too important, right? I mean, as a startup, you certainly have much greater priorities. But to completely ignore security and just go build something, regardless of its default settings or whatever vulnerabilities or whatever it may be vulnerable to, is foolish, and it can cause great deals of harm. And even like recently, almost every unsecured Mongo database was erased by hackers like a few weeks ago. And how many of those startups with all of their stuff on those databases just got ruined? I'd like to see that not happen, you know? So if there's one sort of takeaway, it's just give security a little bit of attention from the beginning.
Absolutely. Great. So thanks so much for that. Let's open up to questions. Mish, did you want to moderate that, or?
All right, so we're running a little bit over time, so we have time for one question. So I did tweet out, we've got the audience to vote up their top. So have a quick look at the top votes there and choose your one question to answer.
You see one that you would like to grab there?
I didn't know about this top one.
The
US is asking for social media passwords? I have to think about that.
Yeah.
That's kind of incredible. Is that real?
They definitely take into account social media. They'll look at your public profiles. They'll ask for that, but I don't think they actually enforce. Like, they have the right to turn you away.
I have heard of them ask to like unlock your phone or something. I mean, if they could prove that they were only doing that for high-risk individuals, maybe as a citizen who wants to see my border protect me, I might be okay with this. But you better not be doing that to everybody, and not at random.
Yeah. Time for another quick question?
Yeah, one more quick question.
The second one's particularly interesting. I think, you know, one password or any password manager in general, is that a good thing, or is that centralizing all your passwords in one place and making it nice and easy for for hackers? Can you really trust password managers?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think actually a password manager, if secured properly and not stored on some cloud vendor, I think can be good. And by secured properly, like imagine all of your passwords are in there. It better require two-factor authentication, if not three-factor authentication to get in. Meaning if they don't physically have your phone and know your password to get into it and have some other third thing like facial recognition or thumbprint or something third, then I don't think it's secure enough to store all the passwords. But this is the time to be thinking about getting rid of passwords anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. I think passwords are on their way out. I'm certainly doing everything I can to get rid of passwords. I think they're terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Brandon. It's been great chatting with you, and thanks for being a great audience.